Welcome back to the Deep Dive. For this conversation, we are planting our flag under the banner of Reformed thinking. We have a massive stack of notes here, exegetical commentaries, theological essays, some historical data on the first century church, and we are going to try to get to the bottom of a specific pressing issue.
It is good to be here. And the issue we're tackling today is one that I think keeps a lot of people up at night. If you are in church leadership, it might be keeping you up because, well, you are stressed. And if you are sitting in the pew, it might be keeping you up because you are wondering why the leadership in your church feels off.
Right. We are looking at the heart of the shepherd. Specifically, we are zooming in on 1 Peter 5.2. But before we even get to the verse, we have to talk about the problem. Because Peter doesn't write this in a vacuum, and we aren't reading it in one either. You look around the modern church landscape, and what do you see?
You see a lot of pragmatism. You see a crisis in how we define leadership. The world has a very specific lens for this. It views leadership through corporate maneuvering, the CEO mentality, efficiency, quarterly growth targets.
It is the boardroom model.
Precisely. It is the boardroom model imported directly into the sanctuary. And when you do that, you start looking for managers. You look for guys who can balance a budget, run a committee, or maybe just have a charismatic personality that draws a crowd. It becomes about nickels and noses, budgets, and attendance figures.
Which makes sense on paper, right? I mean, if you are running a nonprofit, you need to be solvent. You want to reach people. You can't just ignore the operational reality of it all.
Absolutely, and that is the trap. Administrative competence isn't a sin. The problem is when the virtues of the manager, things like efficiency, speed, quarterly results, when they displace the virtues of the shepherd.
Which are?
Patience, suffering, and long-term faithfulness. You can be an incredibly efficient manager and a terrible shepherd because shepherding is inherently inefficient.
Right. Sheep are slow, they wander off, they get stuck in brambles. You can't scale a shepherd's care the way you scale a tech startup or a fast food franchise.
Exactly. If you try to apply Six Sigma efficiency to sanctification, you end up crushing people. And that is where the biblical model is just so radically different. It is almost the inverse of the corporate ladder.
And that is where our text comes in. 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 2. Let me just read it so we have it in our heads. Shepherd the flock of God that is among you, exercising oversight, not under compulsion, but willingly, as God would have you.
It is a sentence that stops you cold if you really read it.
So the mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. We want to strip away that secular pragmatism. We want to look at the heart posture required for an elder. We aren't just talking about what an elder does, voting on motions, handing out communion. We're talking about how and why he does it.
And we should establish our coordinates right from the start. This discussion is rooted in Reformed theology. We are looking at this through the lens of the Westminster Standards. When we talk about the church, we are not talking about a nonprofit organization or a social club.
No.
We are talking about the flock of God, that possessive noun of God. It changes everything. These people belong to Christ, not a board of directors.
And the stakes here are incredibly high.
Yeah.
This isn't just inside baseball for pastors or theologians.
No, not at all. This affects everyone.
If you are listening to this and you are an elder, or maybe you aspire to be one, this is obviously for you. But if you are a layperson, this matters because the health of your soul is directly tied to the nature of the oversight you receive. A church led by men who are doing it under compulsion is a church that is being slowly poisoned.
That is a strong image, but I think it is accurate. If the water at the source is bitter, the flock is going to get sick. So we have to look at the source, the heart.
Okay, let's unpack the context first, because Peter doesn't just drop this command out of nowhere.
Yeah.
What is the backdrop here? We often hear suffering, but can we be more specific?
We have to be. The backdrop is the fiery trial. Most scholars date 1 Peter to around the mid-60s AD. This is likely just before or right at the very beginning of the Neronian persecution.
Nero. So we are talking about a time when being a Christian wasn't just unpopular. It was potentially capital treason.
Yeah.
This wasn't about losing your tax-exempt status.
No, we are talking about Christians being used as scapegoats for the Great Fire of Rome. We are talking about believers being marginalized, slandered as haters of mankind, and physically threatened. The recipients of this letter are called sojourners and exiles. They aren't the cultural power brokers. They are the outcasts.
Which changes the pressure on leadership, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It is one thing to be a leader when everything is going great and the budget is in the black. It is another thing entirely when the wolves are actually circling. Why would anyone sign up to be a leader in that environment? You're basically painting a target on your back.
You are. And that is why the internal leadership structure has to be rock solid. If the structure is weak, the building collapses under the storm. If you are a leader just for the status, you are going to bail the moment Nero looks in your direction.
That makes sense.
And what I love about this text is Peter's own posture. He starts verse 1 by calling himself a fellow elder. In the Greek, that is sympresbyteros.
He doesn't pull the apostle card. Listen up, I'm Peter.
He doesn't. And he could have. He is Peter. He walked on water briefly. He preached at Pentecost. But he appeals to them as a participant in Christ's sufferings. He says, I have seen the suffering, and I share in the glory that is to be revealed. He stands beside them, not just above them. He's saying, I know what this cost is. I'm in it with you.
That solidarity is crucial. It feels less like a command from headquarters and more like a word from a general in the trench next to you.
That is exactly the tone.
Now, we should probably clarify some terms, because in the modern church, we have split these things up. We have pastors, we have elders, we have bishops, we have overseers. It can get confusing for people. But in the New Testament, these are not different job descriptions, are they?
No, and that is a major point of confusion today. In the New Testament, elder, presbyteros, overseer, episkopos, and shepherd, poimen, all refer to the same office.
They're interchangeable.
They are. So you see this clearly in Acts 20, where Paul calls the elders of Ephesus and tells them to be overseers and to shepherd the flock. Titus 1 does the same thing. They're just different facets of the same role.
So it's looking at the same diamond from different angles.
Right. Elder speaks to his spiritual maturity and dignity. Overseer speaks to his function of watching over the church, the management side, if you will. And shepherd speaks to the nature of his care, his heart.
So when Peter says shepherd the flock, he isn't just using a nice metaphor for be nice to people. He is giving a job description.
He is giving a command. The central verb here is poimenite. It is an aorist imperative.
Which means, for those of us who haven't opened our Greek textbook in a while,
It means it is decisive. It is urgent. It is not a suggestion. It isn't, if you have time, maybe check in on the sheep. It is shepherd them. Do the work. And the object of that work is the flock of God.
that goes back to what we said earlier, the ownership issue.
It is the fundamental theological reality of the office. The elder is a steward, not an owner. These sheep were bought with the blood of Christ. Acts 20.28 says God obtained the church with his own blood. That changes the dynamic from managing people to caring for God's most precious possession. You treat a rental car differently than you treat your own car, maybe. But you treat a priceless artifact entrusted to you by a king with absolute trembling.
That is a great analogy. If I lend you my lawnmower, you might be careful. If the Queen of England lends you the crown jewels, you are terrified of scratching them.
Precisely. And the modern seeker-sensitive or CEO models often miss this. They treat the church as a demographic to be courted. They replace the bruised, bleeding shepherd with a polished manager, and the implication is disastrous. It sets the stage for the specific sin Peter addresses, compulsion. Because if you are just a manager, you are doing a job. If you are a shepherd, you are laying down your life.
Okay, let's get into that specific sin, not under compulsion. This is the fleshly peril. Let's dig into the word itself. What are we really talking about here?
The Greek word is anakestos. It is an adverb. In the extra-biblical Greco-Roman usage, this word was heavy. It was not just about peer pressure. It was associated with slavery. It was associated with taxation. It was associated with conscription into the army.
So doing something because you have a gun to your head or a spear to your back, force is involved.
Exactly. Or because the law demands it and you have no choice.
Right.
It implies force and necessity. It describes acting because one has to, not because one wants to. It is the service of a man who would rather be anywhere else.
I think we have all seen that man. Or maybe, if we're honest, we have been that man in some area of our lives. But where does this compulsion come from in the church? We don't usually draft people at gunpoint to be elders. We don't have a literal press gang dragging men into the session room.
No, the weapons are much more subtle. The source material identifies several forms of this pressure. One of the biggest is guilt. If I don't do it, I'm unfaithful. If I say no to the nominating committee, I'm saying no to Jesus.
Oh, that is a classic, the weaponized guilt trip. The church needs you. If you don't step up, who will? It's very effective.
It is effective, but it is destructive. Then you have what the sources call panic pragmatism.
Panic pragmatism, I like that phrase. But let's play that out. What does that actually look like in a local church?
It looks like a vacancy on the session. Say your church bylaws require 6 active elders, but you only have 4. The annual congregational meeting is coming up. The clock is ticking.
Right. We have 2 slots to fill. We need bodies.
Exactly. The rota for the prayer meeting is empty, the visitation list is getting long, someone must fill the slot. So you start lowering the bar. You start looking at the membership roster and saying, well, Bob is a nice guy. He runs a successful business. He tithes. He seems reliable.
We just need a warm body in the seat for the meeting.
Exactly. And so you approach Bob. Bob is busy. Bob doesn't feel called. Bob doesn't really want to do the messy work of shepherding. But you say, Bob, we really need you. The church is in a tight spot. So Bob says yes. Not because he loves the work, but because he wants to help the institution survive.
And that treats the office of elder as a functional necessity, like a janitor or a treasurer, rather than a spiritual calling.
Precisely. Then you have familial or social pressure. My father is an elder, his father was an elder, so I guess I have to be an elder. Or just the fear of disappointing the pastor. If the pastor asks you, it is very hard to say no.
And there was one more the sources mentioned that I found really interesting: mystical manipulation.
Yes. This is the God told me card. A leader comes to a man and says, brother, I was praying last night and God told me you must do this. It is a form of spiritualized coercion.
It's manipulative.
It is, because it bypasses all the biblical qualifications. Is he sober-minded? Is he gentle? Does he manage his household well? And it replaces it with a subjective revelation that the man can't argue with without sounding like he is fighting God himself.
Wow. Yeah, that's a tough spot to be in.
It is, and the result of all this is a theological crisis. Serving under compulsion isn't just a personality flaw, it is a profound theological error. It relies on the flesh.
Well, hold on, let me play devil's advocate here for a second. Isn't doing what you don't want to do just maturity? I mean, I don't want to do the dishes, but I do them for my family. I don't want to get up at 3 a.m. to feed the baby, but I do it out of love. Is Peter really saying elders have to feel a constant emotional high? Because that sounds exhausting and, frankly, unrealistic.
That is a crucial distinction. I'm glad you brought it up. We are not talking about emotional hype or constant enthusiasm. We're talking about the will. You do the dishes because you value a clean home and you love your wife. That is a willing sacrifice. It's a choice rooted in love.
Okay.
Compulsion is different. Compulsion is doing the dishes while muttering under your breath that your family doesn't appreciate you and you're the only one who does anything around here.
The martyr complex.
Precisely. It's the difference between I choose to carry this heavy load because I love the destination and I am being crushed by this load and I hate the people who put it on me. One is freedom, the other is slavery.
Okay, that clarifies it.
Yeah.
Now connect that to Reformed theology for us. How is this a theological error, not just a bad attitude?
Well, think about the hireling in John 10. Jesus contrasts the good shepherd with the hireling. The hireling is there for the wage. He's there because he has to be or because he gets something out of it. He doesn't own the sheep. So when the wolf comes, when the trouble starts, when the persecution hits, he flees.
Because he has no skin in the game, no real investment.
He has no heart in the game. If a man is driven by external pressure, he is operating under a legalistic burden. He is acting as if his standing before God or the church's survival depends on his gritted teeth. He is forgetting grace. He is forgetting that Christ builds his church, not us.
So the heart state of a man under compulsion is what? Is it just resentment?
It is external compliance, but internal resentment. He is present in the session room physically. He votes. He might even pray. But his spirit is absent. He is looking at his watch. He is dreading the phone call from the hurting member. He is effectively a spiritual slave in a house of sons.
That is a terrible place to be. And what leads us right into the next segment, which is the diagnostic grid. Because you can't always see resentment on the surface. But Peter gives us some symptoms, some things to look for.
He does. The text in 1 Peter 5, verses 2 and 3 actually sets up three contrasts. Not under compulsion, but willingly. Not for shameful gain, but eagerly. Not domineering, but being examples. The sources treat these negative sides, shameful gain and domineering, as the fruits of unwillingness.
So if you force a man to serve, these are the bad things that pop up, like symptoms of a disease.
Exactly. It is a diagnostic grid. And symptom number 1 is hireling neglect.
What does that look like in practice, in the life of a church?
The reluctant elder does the administrative minimum. He will attend the monthly meeting, he will review the budget, he will vote on the color of the new carpet for the sanctuary, but he avoids the messy work of shepherding souls. He avoids the weary saints.
The person who is struggling with depression for the 3rd year in a row. The couple whose marriage is on the rocks. The awkward teenager who keeps asking difficult questions.
Right, because that work is exhausting. It's emotionally draining. If you don't love the sheep, that work feels like a burden you didn't sign up for. So you hide. You shield yourself with policies and committees. You protect your own comfort over the sheep's safety. You become an administrator, not a father.
Okay, symptom number 2, shameful gain. Now, surely we aren't talking about elders embezzling funds from the offering plate. Most elders I know, especially in the Presbyterian system, are volunteers. They aren't getting paid at all.
True. But shameful gain in the Greek context and in our context is much broader than just cash. If a man feels trapped, if he feels compelled to do a job he hates, he often seeks compensation in other ways. He bargains with God or with the church.
So since I'm suffering through this, I deserve.
Hmm.
What does he want?
Status, deference, influence, the feeling of being indispensable. I'm the guy who runs this place. It feeds the ego. It is a psychological wage. He thinks, I'm making a huge sacrifice here, so you people better listen to me and treat me like a king.
That is dangerous.
Yeah.
It turns service into a transaction. I give you my time. You give me respect and power.
It does. It completely destroys the grace dynamic, and it leads directly to the third symptom, domination. Peter explicitly says, not domineering over those in your charge.
Why does a reluctant man become a tyrant? You would think he would just be passive and checked out.
Psychology tells us that a man who resents his burden often tries to control it. Domination becomes a way to manage his own anxiety and his own resentment. If I can't be happy in this job, I can at least be in charge. I can make sure nothing gets out of hand.
Can you give me a concrete example of what this looks like? Because domineering sounds like a dictator on a balcony, but I assume it's more subtle in a church basement meeting.
It is. Imagine a session meeting. There is a complex pastoral issue. Maybe a family is leaving the church, or there is a difficult theological disagreement. The domineering elder doesn't want to deal with the nuance. He wants it resolved so he can go home.
He wants it off his plate.
Exactly. So he uses procedure as a weapon. He invokes Robert's Rules of Order to shut down discussion. He says, we've already decided this. Let's move on. He snaps at younger elders who ask questions. He gets impatient with people's feelings.
He bulldozes people to get his way.
He does. He creates policies to keep the sheep at arm's length. Don't call me after 9 p.m. Call the church office. Fill out this form if you want to use the fellowship hall. He creates layers of bureaucracy to protect himself from the very people he is supposed to be caring for.
So he becomes harsh, prickly.
He becomes quick-tempered. He becomes a bully. The shepherd becomes a tyrant because he lacks the internal grace of willingness. He is trying to force the church to work efficiently so he doesn't have to bleed for it.
And a church led by tyrants is a church that is hurting. It's a place of fear, not grace.
It is a church that is being scattered. Sheep don't thrive under tyrants. They run away.
So we have seen the disease. We have seen the symptoms: compulsion, neglect, shameful gain, domination. Now let's look at the cure. The spiritual grace, serving willingly.
But willingly. The Greek word is hekusis. It means voluntarily, of your own accord.
Now, clarify this for us again. We touched on it, but is this just personality? Some guys are just naturally helpful. They are the guys who always volunteer to help you move house. Is that what Peter means?
No, this isn't just natural enthusiasm or an extroverted personality type. It isn't just being a nice guy who has trouble saying no. The sources describe it as a settled readiness. It is a Godward consent.
I like that. Godward consent.
Okay. The sources make a very important distinction here. Willingness does not mean the work is easy. It doesn't mean the elder never feels tired. It doesn't mean he never sighs when the phone rings at 2 a.m. with a crisis.
Right. Because shepherding is hard work. It's muddy. It's bloody sometimes.
It is brutal work. Willingness means he accepts the cost freely. He is not dragged to the task. He knows it is going to hurt, and he says yes anyway because he loves the shepherd and he loves the sheep.
Which brings us to the ultimate example. We can't talk about this without talking about Christ.
Yeah.
Because if we just leave it at be more willing, that is just moralism. It's just another law to crush us.
Exactly. This has to have a Christological foundation. You look at Jesus in Gethsemane, he knows what is coming. The cup of wrath, the betrayal, the abandonment, the cross. He isn't sitting there whistling a happy tune. He is sweating drops of blood.
He is in agony. The text is clear about that.
Complete agony. And yet what does he say? Not my will, but yours be done.
He wasn't a victim being dragged to his fate.
No. John 10:18, no one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. He laid down his life willingly. He walked out of that garden to meet Judas. He wasn't dragged. He chose the nails.
That is powerful.
So, for the Reformed thinker, the elder's willingness must mirror the willing heart of Jesus Christ. If the under-shepherd is resentful, if he is dragging his feet, he is lying about the chief shepherd. He is presenting a false image of Christ to the flock. He is saying service is a burden when Christ showed that service is love.
So where does this willingness come from? You can't just conjure it up. You can't just say, okay, starting today, I'm going to be willing.
No, you can't manufacture it. It is a spirit-wrought affection. It bridges the internal aspiration. Paul says in 1 Timothy 3:1, he desires a noble task and the external call from the church. And notice what Peter adds, as God would have you.
That is a key phrase. It's not just willingly, but willingly as God would have you.
It is. The willingness is shaped by God's will, not by human ambition. It isn't, I'm willing because I want to be famous, or I'm willing because I want to run things. It is, I'm willing because God has called, and I'm answering his call according to his standards.
This feels like a good moment to really dig into the Reformed theological framework behind all this. Because we are Reformed thinking, after all. We hear these terms in seminary, indicative and imperative, and they can feel very dry and academic. But in this text, Peter is using them for life and death.
He is. And if you get the order wrong, you don't just get bad theology, you get burnout and bitterness. The indicative is the statement of fact. It's who we are in Christ, what he has done for us. The imperative is the command. It's what we must do.
So Christ died for you is the indicative. Love your neighbor is the imperative.
Correct. And the order matters. The imperative must always be grounded in and flow from the indicative. If an elder skips the gospel, what Christ did, and goes straight to duty, what I must do, he falls right into that compulsion trap. If I tell an elder, you must be willing, be more eager, that is a naked imperative. It's a law that crushes him.
It's like telling a paralyzed man to get up and run a marathon.
Exactly. But Reformed theology says we look at the indicative first. Christ has united you to himself. He has given you his spirit. He has already shepherded you with perfect willingness, even unto death. That's the reality. And the command to be willing is a call to live out that reality.
So the willingness isn't something I conjure up to impress God. It's a resource I tap into because I'm in God through Christ.
Right. John Calvin talks about this, that our obedience is a filial response, the response of a son, not a slave. The slave obeys to avoid the whip. That's compulsion. The son obeys because he shares the father's heart and wants to please him. That's willingness.
And that leads into the third use of the law. Can you explain that for our listeners who might not have their systematic theology textbook open?
Sure. In Reformed theology, we distinguish three uses of God's moral law. The first use is a mirror to show us our sin and drive us to Christ. The second use is a restraint to keep civil society from descending into chaos. And the third use is the guide for the believer. It is how the regenerate heart expresses its gratitude to God.
So the command shepherd willingly isn't a way to get saved.
No, absolutely not. It is the standard for grateful obedience. It is how the sanctified man says thank you to God for his salvation. The Westminster Larger Catechism, when it talks about the duties of our station, emphasizes that we do them with diligence and faithfulness. Willingness is a fruit of that sanctification. It is evidence that the Spirit is at work in the man's heart, killing the idol of comfort and raising up the virtue of sacrificial love.
And all of this is impossible without union with Christ.
That is the engine that drives the whole thing. The elder can only shepherd willingly because of his union with Christ. Think of the vine and the branches in John 15. The branch doesn't struggle and strain to produce a grape. It simply abides in the vine, and the life of the vine flows through it and produces the grape. The elder draws his strength from the vine. He is not generating this willingness from his own moral reserves. He is tapping into the inexhaustible life of Christ.
I think that is so freeing for anyone in leadership. Because if I thought I had to be an elder based on my own endless supply of patience and love, I would quit today.
We all would, because our supply runs out around 2:00 p.m. on a Tuesday. Christ's supply never runs out.
So let's get practical. We have listeners who are part of churches. Maybe they are on a search committee for a new pastor. Maybe they are on a nominating committee for new elders. How do we put up guardrails to prevent this compulsion culture from taking root? Because it's one thing to understand the theology, it's another to stop the committee from panic recruiting Bob.
The first guardrail is dealing with the danger of filling slots. We talked about this earlier, but we have to be firm on this. Churches often manufacture compulsion because they are terrified of empty seats.
We need 12 elders because our bylaws say we need 12 elders.
And so they get 12 men, but 4 of them are unwilling, resentful men. And those 4 men drag down the whole session. The warning from the sources is clear. It is better to have a smaller session of willing men than a large session of reluctant, coerced men.
Quality over quantity, Gideon's army logic.
Absolutely. A unified, willing minority can do more for the kingdom than a divided, resentful majority. If you only have 3 qualified and willing men, then have a session of 3. Change the bylaws if you have to. Don't change the biblical standard to fit your bylaws.
So guardrail number 1 is, don't panic, be patient. What is guardrail number 2?
Vetting and process. We need to slow down. Scripture says, do not be hasty in the laying on of hands.
But we are always in a rush. Efficiency again. We need to get this done by the congregational meeting.
We are, but discernment takes time. We need to prioritize discernment over recruitment. Stop using guilt trips. If you have to twist a man's arm to get him to the table, he is going to be a problem at the table.
If you really love Jesus, you'd help us out. We need to ban that phrase.
We do. The question isn't, do you love Jesus? It is, are you called and qualified for this specific office, and do you desire the work?
And how do we know if they are? It's easy to fake it in an interview. A guy can say all the right things.
That is guardrail number 3, practical testing. Let men taste the work of shepherding before you give them the title.
Like an internship or a trial period.
In a sense, before you nominate a man, ask him to join the elders on some hospital visits. Ask him to sit in on a difficult counseling situation, where appropriate and with permission, of course. Ask him to lead a small group or a prayer meeting. See if he has an appetite for the work, not just the position.
That is brilliant, because some guys love the idea of being an elder, the title, the respects, sitting at the head table.
Yeah.
But they hate the smell of the sheep.
Exactly. If a man comes back from a hospital visit and says, that was exhausting, but I felt the Lord's presence and I want to go back, that is a very good sign. That is the spirit-wrought willingness. But if he comes back and says, don't ever make me do that again, it was depressing and a waste of my evening, then you have your answer.
And you got the answer before you ordained him for life.
Exactly. It saves everyone a lot of pain down the road. It protects the flock from a hireling, and it protects the man from a burden he was never meant to carry.
Let's speak directly to the listeners for a moment. We have different groups tuning in.
Let's start with the aspiring elder, the guy who is thinking about this, who wants the job.
What do we say to him?
Check your heart. Be ruthless with yourself. Ask the hard questions. Are you doing this for status? Do you want to be in the room where it happens? Do you like the idea of being seen as a leader? Or do you genuinely desire the work of caring for souls? If nobody ever knew you were an elder, if you got no title, no recognition, would you still want to do the work?
That is the acid test. Now, what about the current elder? The guy who is listening and realizing, uh-oh, I'm the guy serving under compulsion. I'm resentful. I dread the meetings. I avoid the phone calls.
That is a hard realization to come to, but there is grace. If you are groaning under the weight, the first step is to repent. Not just to try harder, but to repent of the sin of unwillingness. Go back to the cross. Remember what you have been saved from. Return to your first love. And honestly, if the resentment is deep and settled, it might be time to step down for a season.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
To step down?
It is more than okay. It is sometimes the most faithful thing to do. There is no shame in saying, I need to be shepherded right now, not be the shepherd.
That is wise. Sometimes the most faithful thing you can do is step back to heal. And finally, to the layperson, the person in the pew, what's their role in all this?
You have a huge role here. Do not treat your elders as service providers. Don't treat them like customer service agents for your religious goods and services. Pray for them, encourage them, and listen to Hebrews 13:17. Let them do this with joy and not with groaning, for that would be of no advantage to you.
If you make your elder miserable, you are only hurting yourself.
Exactly. A groaning elder is a bad shepherd, so be the kind of sheep that makes shepherding a joy. Be teachable, be gracious. Don't be the reason he feels compelled instead of willing.
I love that. Now, we are heading towards the end, but we have to look up. We have to look at the horizon, segment 7. Eschatological hope. That is a big word, but it just means last things.
It is the anchor of motivation. Peter ends this section with verse 4. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory.
Why does Peter pivot to the end times here? We're talking about budgets and hospital visits and difficult meetings.
Because the reward for shepherding isn't here. It isn't now. If you are looking for your reward in this life in thank you cards, in a bigger salary, in a successful ministry, in a big building, you are going to be disappointed and you will burn out. The sheep bite. The world attacks. The work is hard. If you look at the immediate feedback loop, it's often negative.
So if you are working for the paycheck of immediate gratification, you're going to go bankrupt very quickly.
You will quit. But if you are working for the crown of glory, that is unfading. That is secure.
This fits that already not yet tension we talk about in Reformed theology.
It does. We labor now in the sufferings. We look forward to the glory. The sources mention this fits with a specific view of anticipation. Christ is coming back. The chief shepherd is going to inspect his flock and reward his faithful under-shepherds.
And that frees you, doesn't it? That changes your whole perspective.
It liberates you. It frees the elder from being a people pleaser. He is playing to an audience of one. He can be willing to make the hard call, to have the difficult conversation, to serve even when the sheep are grumpy, even when the session meeting goes until midnight, because his reward isn't coming from the people in the room. It is coming from the king who is returning.
That is the only sustainable fuel source for ministry. Anything else will eventually run out.
It is the only one that doesn't burn dirty. Ambition burns dirty. Guilt burns dirty. People-pleasing burns dirty. Hope in Christ burns clean.
So let's summarize. We have covered a lot of ground today.
We have. We have seen that the problem is a secular, pragmatic view of leadership that prioritizes efficiency over faithfulness.
We looked at the text, 1 Peter 5.2, and the peril of compulsion serving out of guilt, panic, or force, and how that leads to neglect, greed, and tyranny.
And we saw the grace of willingness, a spirit-wrought, Godward consent that mirrors Jesus Christ in Gethsemane. We anchored it in the Reformed understanding of the gospel, the indicative fueling the imperative.
And we laid out some practical guardrails for the church. Slow down, test men, don't manipulate, and most of all, keep your eyes on the crown of glory.
That is the roadmap.
Here's my final charge to you, the listener. If you are an office bearer, look away from your own strength. You can't muscle your way through this. You will fail. Behold the chief shepherd. Rest in his strength.
And if you are in the congregation, support a culture where willing service can flourish. Don't be the source of the compulsion. Be the source of encouragement.
I want to leave you with this thought. It is a bit provocative, but I think it is necessary. Consider this. If the world defines leadership by how much power you accumulate, and the gospel defines leadership by how freely you lay down your life, whose definition is your church actually following?
That is the question.
Look at your structure. Look at your nominating process. Look at your heart. And answer honestly.
It changes everything.
This has been Reformed Thinking. Thanks for diving deep with us.
Sole Deo Gloria.